Hello everyone. Hi, welcome to today's webinar with Burnett in conjunction with the Cumbria Chamber. Today we're going to be talking about menopause and the workplace. My name's Anna Lovett. I'm a senior associate at Burnett Solicitors, specialising in employment and HR. And I've got my colleague here with me, Christina O'Donnell, who is our HR consultant as well. Couple of things to say to begin with. This session today is actually a re-record of a session that we ran earlier on in the month. The reason we are doing a re-record is because actually we ran the session in a very interactive way with plenty of discussion. So what we did at the time is we decided not to record it to allow everyone to kind of freely discuss this topic. So this is a re-record, but we'll be going through the same information that we did on the session that day. So menopause, why are we talking about it all of a sudden? Everyone's talking about it. Davina McCall is talking about it. Rod Stewart has been on Loose Women talking about it. Why is it suddenly a hot topic? You know, women have been going through the menopause since the dawn of time. So why is it suddenly a hot topic today? So we're going to touch on that in terms of the developments that have kind of got us to today in terms of the government, and also kind of why workplaces are looking at this. A couple of points to make before we start the session is that we obviously are talking about the menopause in the context of the workplace. I'm a lawyer, I'm not a medical professional, so there is no kind of medical part of this talk. And also the other comment I wanted to make was that we do talk about women throughout today's session, but it's important to note that other people who identify either as non-binary or trans can also go through the menopause, but I will be using the term women for today's talk. So what I'll do is I'll pass on to my colleague Christina, let her kind of introduce herself, say hello, and we'll move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. As Anna said, I'm Christina O'Donnell. I am the HR consultant at Burnett Solicitors. Many thanks for taking the time to watch this recording today. So as Anna said, like Anna, I am not a medical profession, so we are very much, you know, we've researched this subject and are delivering the information via, you know, the employment, you know, status and, you know, and how it affects the workplace. All right, so I'm going to move on to some of the facts and myths that surround the menopause. One of the first facts is one of the first points there is that the menopause starts at 50. I'm afraid this is untrue. In fact, menopause can start at any age, and there is no real clear cause for that. So we will go into more detail of all these points that are being mentioned at the moment. But yep, there's no definite age that the menopause will start. The second one there is the only symptom of menopause is hot flushes. Again, this is untrue. There are up to 34 common symptoms that are related to the menopause. And again, as I said, we'll go into that in a wee bit more detail later on. There's the point there, menopause is a protected characteristic under the Equality Act 2010. Now, at the moment, this is false. However, it is being widely publicised, as Anna mentioned, and there has been talk in Parliament. There's many petitions that have been signed and many celebrities advocating that this should be a protected characteristic. However, at this moment in time, it is not a protective characteristic. Okay, the next point there is menopause only affects half of the population. Again, this is incorrect because not only does menopause affect those who are going through menopause symptoms and going through the menopause, it also affects, you know, their wider families, friends and colleagues. So the symptoms that come along with menopause can also have that filtering out effect that, you know, that it does affect those around the individuals that are experiencing it. And again, menopause is a natural transition for all. This is false. It predominantly, as Anna says, it affects women. However, individuals that have went through gender reassignment to become women can also feel the effects of the menopause. So it's more sort of a natural transition, more so for females, as it's an example, as it occurs due to the estrogen hormone. But again, we'll go into a wee bit more detail of that just shortly. Okay, Anna? So what is the menopause? The menopause is a natural part of aging. Again, as it states, it naturally occurs between the age of 45 to 55 years of age as women's estrogen levels decline. However, this is not exclusive. As I said, it can occur at any time, and symptoms can begin a long time before in a stage called perimenopause. Around 1 in 100 women experience menopause before the age of 40 for the symptoms, and this can be due to various ailments. So as it says, the menopause is caused by a change of the balance of the body's sex hormones, which occurs as women get older. So it occurs when the ovaries stop producing as much of the hormone estrogen and no longer releases an egg each month. So premature or early menopause can occur at any age, and in many cases, as I said, there's no clear cause, but sometimes it can be caused by treatments such as surgery to remove ovaries. Some breast cancer treatments can cause early menopause, such as, following treatment of chemotherapy or radiotherapy, or it can be brought on by an underlying condition such as Down syndrome or Addison's disease. Perimenopause starts before menopause really takes hold. Okay, so that stands for around menopause and refers to the time during which your body makes that natural transition to menopause, which basically marks the end of the reproductive years. And perimenopause is also called the menopausal transition. The final stage of menopause is called postmenopause, where individuals may require some treatment such as hormone replacement to replace the hormone levels that have decreased. Some additional treatments may be required, such as a low-dose antidepressant and some preventative medications to prevent, conditions such as osteoporosis due to a decline in calcium and to prevent any sort of calcium deficiencies. So women can actually begin to encounter perimenopause at different ages. However, most commonly, it would be between the age of 40 to 44. This can go on through a wide range of physical and psychological symptoms, which again, we'll touch base on just shortly. These can actually last up to 12 years. So menopause isn't something that just comes and goes very quickly. It's something that starts, most commonly from 40, right, and lasts right through to the age of 50, 52. But again, that is just the most common ages. All right. Some facts and figures around menopause. 10 million, at the moment, there's 10 million people over 50 years of age in employment. Okay, so when we think back to the age that the menopause affects, we need to think of those that are working around us. How many of our colleagues are possibly, going through the menopause at the moment? Are in our team or in your team, how many ladies could be affected by this? As 31% of women of the workplace is over 50. We do need to take into considerations the adjustments and how this would be affecting the overall performance. What adjustments can we do for these individuals to support them in the workplace to ensure that performance levels aren't affected? It is estimated that 700,000 fewer, there'll be 700,000 fewer 16 to 14-year-olds in the workforce by 2022. Here we are, so at this moment in time, almost a third of our workforce are those that would be affected by the menopause, or possibly married to, or in a team with, or working alongside someone who may be suffering from some of the symptoms that come along with it. So there's estimated 3.7 million more people aged between 50, and there'll be 3.7 million more people aged between the age of 50 and the state pension by 2022. Again, it's so current. Here we are. 2022 has crept up on us very quickly, and 1.19 million over 65s in employment in July 2016 compared to 478,000. So in terms of capacity, we have doubled since 1992. So in the last 20 years, the workforce has doubled in those in the age 65s category. Okay, Anna, can we move on just to the next slide there? So, is the menopause a workplace issue? Well, most women will go through the menopause. In the UK, it is estimated that around 1 in 3 women are either currently going through it, as we've just seen in the previous slide, or have reached the menopause. Okay, 88% of women workers who had experienced the menopause felt it had an effect on their working life. And I know from personal experience of being an HR professional and working with individuals to try and support them with various adjustments, this is very predominant at this moment in time. So that's a factual, it's a real comment, and it's not something that's that should be shied away from either. We need to really look at supporting our managers, to find ways that we can work with this within the workplace. So around 6 in 10 had witnessed the issues being treated, the issue being treated as a joke in the workplace. Now, there is a fine line between what's banter and what's not, and again, we'll have a look at that just shortly. However, managing the effect of menopause at work is important for both, the employees, the employers, and all staff. All right. For those experiencing symptoms, it can be difficult. It can be a really difficult and stressful time. Everyone's going to, not one hat fits all. Everyone will experience the menopause differently. And for some, symptoms can be really quite severe and can affect people both physically and mentally. The menopause is a natural stage of life, which affects around half of the population. So this can include women, trans people. Trans, as I mentioned earlier, it's an umbrella term used to describe people whose gender is not the same as the sex that they were born with or assigned with at birth. Intersex, it can also affect intersex people. So some people prefer the term differences in sex development. So we really need to be very cautious and aware of of how we approach what the individual needs and what policies and procedures that we have in place to allow them, to come to work and feel comfortable in doing so, as well as cope with the symptoms and the impact that menopause may be having on them, at that time. Okay, Anna, we'll just move on.
Thanks, Christina. I think for me, that question, isn't it? Is this a workplace issue? And why are we all talking about it now? And actually, we at Burnett, we as a team did training ourselves a couple of years ago now about menopause in the workplace that was run through the Employment Lawyers Association and ACAS. And actually, for me, I'll hold my hands up, that was probably the first time I had kind of learned much about the menopause, but also the impact that it can have on people in the workplace. And actually, when Christina's just gone through those facts and figures there, that is a huge demographic of our workforce and a huge demographic that essentially leaving the workforce because they're not getting the support that they need when they're going through this natural transition. And as I say, when I was first learning about this, one of the things that really stuck with me was kind of the personal stories. So what I wanted to do quickly is just kind of read out one of those stories. As I say, we at Burnett, we've done our training internally, and we've also signed the Menopause Pledge, which is with the Wellbeing of Women organisation. And this is where this case study comes from. So the Wellbeing of Women organisation have a number of case studies that they have published. So I'm just going to read that out for you, again, just so you can experience kind of someone else's story. So Barbara was 46 when she went into surgical menopause. Working in a senior management position, the impact of the sudden changes and lack of workplace support led her to make the difficult decision to leave a career she relished. Here's Barbara's story. I was 44 when I started going through my perimenopause journey. I was experiencing some hot flushes, night sweats, and severe fatigue. None of the symptoms were unmanageable though, and I began thinking, perhaps naively, that it wasn't going to be too bad. Little did I know what was coming. As things progressed, I started to experience awful periods, pain, and heavy bleeding. My cycle was getting shorter and my bleeding more frequent. I've always had issues with my periods, but these new symptoms became horrendous. I was referred to a gynecologist, and it was decided I should have a hysterectomy, which would involve the removal of my ovaries and fallopian tubes. For me, this is when the real menopause started. I went into surgery in perimenopause, and I came out full-blown menopause. It was immediate, like bang. The symptoms all came at once. I had hot flushes, dry skin, and shockingly, my hair started to fall out in clumps. But without question, the worst symptom was the impact on my mental health and my cognitive ability. I started to experience an overwhelming sense of panic and anxiety. A feeling of impending doom sat constantly on my chest. I wanted to go back to work. I worked in a senior management position where I led a large team, and I would spend my days managing my team and talking to people across the organisation. As I started to recover from the physical impact of the hysterectomy, I wanted to go back to work. I knew in my role there would be no easing myself back in, but I was unprepared of how tricky it really would be. It felt like someone had hoovered out half of my brain. My memory was shot to pieces. I was taking so many notes in meetings, I couldn't just think on my feet anymore, and I felt at times I was barely able to contribute. I felt hot and sweaty all the time. Some meeting rooms had no aircon. I didn't want to speak up in meetings for fear of people noticing how heavily I was sweating or how flushed I looked. I had lots of issues with my weakened pelvic floor following my surgery, and at times I needed the bathroom every hour, which was difficult in meetings that last several hours. I became so worried about having an accident, I became fearful of leaving the house. Overnight, after nearly 20 years in senior management, I knew this couldn't go on. I had lost all my confidence. I was proactive and I reached out to HR and my manager for help. They said all the right things, but in practice, I didn't feel there was enough knowledge or services to really help employees through the menopause. Apart from a brief presentation at Wellbeing Session, I'm not sure I ever heard menopause being spoken about at work. Unlike pregnancy that affects some women in the workplace, menopause is a period of life that affects almost every woman, and it didn't seem very high on the agenda. There were certainly no policies that supported staff with this, and no one in a senior role openly spoke about the menopause or championed it as an important health issue. I made the very difficult decision to leave the job I loved and a career I relished. I thought that was, sorry, Tina, I'll let you go.
No, I'm just thinking as an HR professional, I just wonder how much key talent has been lost, just like Barbara. It's quite frightening to think that by doing some small adjustments within the workplace, how that could support. There's a few things there. She needed the bathroom every hour. So there's something that can easily be done. Okay, don't make meetings last more than an hour without having a small break. She was sweating all the time. Okay, what about a fan? Was there a fan? Was she able to be sat beside a window? There's so many different things there, Anna, that could have been done to support Barbara within the workplace, to make her realise how valued she was within the workplace. And I think that's a key thing for me. And it's something that I always try to ensure that is advocated as an individual feels valued within their role within the workplace. And possibly had Barbara's manager known, it would have been a much easier, in terms of having to deal with that additional stress over and above what she was already going through. It would have been much easier to deal with, within the workplace, had her manager had a level of awareness as to what their limited, what they were able to do to support Barbara in coming back, which could have taken place through a discussion easily with a return to work. We have all these processes there. It's just about trying to align those processes and, and threading them together. And
it's interesting, isn't it? Because she says, oh, I went to HR, I went to my manager. They said all the right things, but yeah, I don't feel they actually were doing something about it. I mean, what would you recommend in terms of then, how does a business get it right?
Well, for me, I think that it's a lot of policies, a lot of employee handbooks are there and they're sat on the shelf. You know, they gather dust. For me, it's really important in anything that we certainly do at Burnett's and the clients that we work with. It's important for me to bring these things to life and for them to understand, you know, these documents are so important. They're so important for the experience of an employee within any organisation. And they're so important not only for the employee, but they're also important for the manager, because it gives the manager a toolkit that they can tap into as and when needed. You know, it's never going to cover everything, but if you can cover the majority, then you can seek, you know, some advice from HR. You can seek, you know, some additional support elsewhere if needed. So, you know, for me, it would be more about how do we link our processes and policies together? Do we have the right ones in place that reflect what our, you know, our workforce need? There's no point in having a whole set of policies there that are doing nothing, you know, to support your business.
As you say, that, yeah, they've got to be, you know, living and breathing documents, don't they? You know, you've got to have, it's a culture thing, isn't it? You've got to have buy-in from the top. You know, Barbara said, you know, no one had ever talked about the menopause. There was a one brief presentation, that was it. You know, so I think for me, a big thing, absolutely, in terms of policies, procedures, get them in place and make sure that they're actually actions and living and breathing documents. And I think a big part of that is having your senior leadership, you know, involved in this and having these conversations and being very open. You know, just those simple conversations could have meant Barbara felt comfortable to say to a manager, actually, I'm really struggling in those meetings, rather than, you know, holding back maybe a bit.
Absolutely. These things often need to be filtered down through the top. Everybody needs to buy into it. So it's got to be that clear communication piece, which is so vital in any organisation. You know, but there are a lot of new policies that have came to the table that may not have been implemented, you know, for various organisations. Because, you know, as I say, quite often the employee handbook is, you know, gathers dust, you know, and just sits in a hard drive or, you know, sits in a paper form somewhere that if someone needs it, they possibly tap into it. But for me, it's about bringing those policies to life. It's about doing 10-minute workshops. It's about reinforcing them, you know, so that people are aware. It's about breaking the taboo of these subjects, regardless, you know, what the subject may be. You know, this isn't just about men, although this power hour is about menopause. It's not just about menopause in the workplace. There's so many other, you know, contributing factors that, you know, that do arise in your personal life that may need additional support. You know, I'll give a brief example. For example, parental leave. You know, how is that brought to life? Do we only get, you know, some fathers only get paternity leave for a couple of weeks after the child's born? Well, hold on a second. You know, they may need something in a year's time. They may need something. You know, children grow and various, you know, things happen. So how do we support, you know, our families within the organisation too? So I guess looking at a 360 as to how these policies are being rolled out and how they all link together, and just, as you say, bring them to life, you know, bring them to life and reinforce them, you know, and support your organisation, because that's where you're going to retain your key talent. You know, you're going to ensure that the individuals feel supported and valued within their organisation, and those contributions are naturally going to have, you know, are naturally going to support your objectives and increase that, you know, that performance, rather than, you know, seeing it suffer unnecessarily.
Yeah. Thanks, Christina. Excellent. So we'll move on just in terms of a brief overview there of the common symptoms. Now, as Christina said before, this is by no means a complete list of symptoms, but a couple of kind of common symptoms to look out for there. We've got the headaches, the joint stiffness, aches and pains, dry eyes, skin. Hot flushes, probably the most well-known or kind of most publicized. Changes in sleep pattern, which again, the knock-on effect of lack of sleep, you know, we'll all be aware of that, but, you know, in terms of medically, it has a real impact if you are sleep deprived. You know, it's used as a form of torture. You know, it's not great. Problems with memory and concentration, mood changes. For me, that was a real thing that has come out of the training that we've done and the cases that we've seen. The cognitive impact. The impact on your cognitive ability actually is huge, and it sometimes outweighs the physical symptoms. And then we've kind of got palpitations and weight gain as well. As we said before, this is by no means a full list, you know, and each person will suffer different symptoms to varying degrees as well. So it really comes down to that communication piece. Okay, not to scare you with this slide, but a very simple Google or kind of a search of a well-known tabloid kind of brings up a various headlines which are on this slide. A legal issue. So we've touched on the moral reasons for supporting staff. We've touched on the business reasons in terms of recruitment and retention. There's also legal reasons of why this is important in terms of legal risk to organisations. Menopause cases are on the rise. The tribunals aren't very good at releasing data. So their last data actually is from 2021. But so just to give you some figures, back in 2018, there was only 5 cases that mentioned the menopause. In 2021, that jumped to 10 mentions in the first 6 months of 2021. So it had doubled just in that first 6 months of 2021. The other point I would make about that doesn't sound very long, 10 cases. The number of cases that go to tribunal, in terms of the ones that actually get to tribunal and get to final hearing, is a very small percentage. You actually have a lot of cases that end up being settled or, you know, withdrawn throughout the process. Those are not public cases. So in reality, there is likely to be a lot more menopause cases coming through the process. They're just not getting to final hearing. And again, from my experience, that is the case. I have menopause cases on my desk at the moment, and I've never had one, you know, so far. These are the first ones coming through. So it is definitely something that is being looked at. So what are the cases? As Christina said before, menopause is not currently a protected characteristic under the Equality Act, so it's not classified as a protected characteristic in itself. However, an employer or a worker can possibly bring a discrimination claim arising out of their menopause symptoms on various different characteristics. So the most common ones are age, disability, and sex. So the Women's and Equality Committee, they are currently carrying out an inquiry as to whether menopause should be a protected characteristic. And what the evidence has been in that inquiry so far is that there is these cases, they are still coming through, but what is happening is that employers are having to shoehorn those cases into one of these 3 protected characteristics rather than it being a standalone position. The most common one that is brought is disability discrimination. Okay, so disability under the Equality Act does have a very specific definition. Okay, so it has to be a physical or mental impairment that has a long-term and adverse effect on your ability to carry out day-to-day activities. It's a very long-winded definition, but essentially it means you've got to have symptoms which impact on your day-to-day ability to carry out normal things. And there has been a case that has gone through the tribunal which has now established that menopausal symptoms could be a disability. Okay, so I was going to read to you kind of just some of the examples that have been given in that case of the symptoms that this woman is suffering, which allows her to be able to say she is disabled under the Equality Act. Okay, so this claimant was experiencing hot flushes 7 to 8 times a day, which were regularly accompanied by palpitations and feelings of anxiety. If she was under stress or pressure, then these flushes would be increased to 10 to 12 times per day. She was suffering from night sweats, which disturbed her sleep, such that she was awake 6 to 8 times per night, which then resulted in a disrupted sleep and experienced fatigue, memory difficulties, and concentration difficulties. She also suffered from memory loss and concentration problems and anxiety. The judge said in this case that he was satisfied that the anxiety was caused or at least contributed to by the claimant's menopausal symptoms. She also had difficulty in terms of her work, difficulty using her computer. Her use was a lot slower because she had difficulty remembering how to use certain software packages. And because of her anxiety, she essentially would overcheck her work, and therefore a task would take much longer. She lost the ability to read or write at a reasonable pace. And also she, in terms of the memory difficulties, she found it difficult to remember simple things such as a car registration plate. Okay, so that gives you some context and some practical examples of what could be classed as a disability under the Equality Act for the menopausal symptoms. So definitely interesting and definitely ones to look out for. If someone is disabled under the Equality Act, not only are they protected in terms of discrimination, i.e. you're not allowed to treat that person less favourably, there is also an additional duty on employers to make reasonable adjustments. So where someone is put at a disadvantage because of their disability, i.e. their symptoms, then you as an employer are required to make reasonable adjustments to alleviate that disadvantage. So I just wanted to cover, kind of off the back of that, some possible support and adjustments that could be put in place. And I guess it goes back to what you were saying, Christina, earlier, that actually some of these adjustments are very, very simple. Yep. You know, they're very small, little adjustments that can make the world of difference to a person who's suffering with these symptoms. Absolutely. So couple of examples there: access to cold water, uniforms. Think about your staff that do have, uniforms. Actually, is there a way to get a large cut, provide more uniforms? If, say, for example, someone is suffering from hot flushes, so they can change more regularly. Have we got a breathable fabric? Are we using a breathable fabric? Is it possible to change that? Access to showers and other facilities, a desk fan. You can get really small plug-in USB desk fans, really simple. We have quite a few, just in terms of our workforce. I know for a fact we've got quite a few little desk fans, dotted around the office. Use of a quiet room, a place to go and relax, try and lower the anxiety. And then we've got the various other ones there. One of the ones that stood out to me, and actually it was when I was running, we've done a number of these sessions, and it was only when I was running the last one that I've added this, a reasonable adjustment passport. This was something that came up in the Women's and Equality Committee evidence that was given, and it was evidence given by head of HR at the police force. And basically she was saying that they have introduced reasonable adjustment passports. The reason being is, as a large organisation, i.e. the police force, you often get employees who move departments, are seconded to various different, employers within that organisation. And actually what they were finding was that person was having to have the same conversation with another line manager about what support they needed. And actually, so what they introduced was a reasonable adjustment passport, which means that essentially goes with the individual. So there's no need for that individual to have to feel like they have to ask again for these further adjustments. It's already something that the businesses are willing to do and willing to support. So I thought that was interesting and something that maybe, if you are a larger employee, you might want to think about introducing. But I think my final point on this would be, to remember, no one size fits all. It is very much case by case basis. And actually, this is what comes back to communication, doesn't it? Actually, we're talking about the menopause, and we've talked all the different symptoms. And I've given Barbara's story. That's Barbara's story. It doesn't mean it's someone else's story. And actually, everyone will have a different experience. Some employees will be fine. They won't need support. They won't need adjustments. Other employees will. But it's important not to project onto that employee what you think is right for them. And actually, you only know what's right with them for them by having that conversation.
Absolutely, and I think that there's so many there's so many fresh. I think that our policies and our approach to the working environment has absolutely changed. There's a lot of change agendas, as you know, Anna, that we support, and a lot of them are very holistic. Whereas previously, organisations ran on a tangible approach. It was all about hitting targets, and it wasn't really about the employee. Whereas now we are the employee. When you look at new sort of performance management frameworks, you can see that holistic approach is very important to ensuring that your employees feel, comfortable, confident, skilled, within their work environment. So, for example, flexible working would have supported with the sleepless nights. That later start, if you're getting, an extra couple of hours in the morning where you don't need to start at 8, 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, or if possible, could you do it in the evening? Could you work on in the evening and make up your hours? You might not, you might eliminate those kind of start and finish times and just allow, as long as you finish or complete, that your working hours within the working week, then, that could justify within while you're going through this, these symptoms. It doesn't need to be every day, but it could be an option, that's there for organisations. So yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot that managers can do in terms of finding out what's available to them within their organisation. HR can again roll out these workshops, support managers with the workshops, break down the taboo. What is your culture? Do you want your key talent to be retained? How do we do that? There's different ways, there's different approaches, as you say, not one hat fits all. And I think that it's really important to be aware and reinforce the policies that you have, bring them to life, because they could make such a huge difference, and understand that the difference that these slight adjustments may make, and see the effects of those, and ensure that you provide that internal and external support, as and where needed. Is there possibly, are you limited to your resources? Well, okay, what can you find out? Resources, i.e. there may be a funding issue, there may be different things that can contribute to it. So there's always a way to try and work it. There's always a way to try and accommodate where we can. And at the same time, it's very important for individuals to take their, to acknowledge their responsibilities within it, because if they suffer in silence, then nobody's going to know. You need to come forth, you need to be honest, you need to speak to those that you feel most comfortable with, whether that be your HR department, whether that be your line manager. It's really important that you raise the subject too, because again, you don't want to cross that line of becoming offensive, and and you need to take responsibility and ownership yourself too, and and put in place various health styles and lifestyle choices that support you with the condition, and support you through that.
I think just touching on what you were saying there in terms of resources as well. I put this slide. This is a new slide that I put in recently, just to bring it up to date for you all. Where are we at with it in terms of kind of legislation, but also just industry support generally. In terms of legislation, the Women's Inequality Committee, they've heard all the evidence that they wanted to hear. We haven't had, nothing's been pulled together in terms of an outcome yet. So we are waiting for that. The UK Menopause Task Force has started. So that is a task force that is going to meet, it's cross-party, and it's going to meet every bi-monthly. And that is part of kind of a bigger objective in terms of women's health generally. So all of this kind of forms part of that. So they are specifically looking at hormone therapy and potentially trying to make that kind of an over-the-counter type drug rather than prescription. So that's where we are with government. Industry-wise, there's a whole host of kind of resources out there for you, regardless of your size of business and kind of budget, etc., that you've got behind you. There is resources out there, so do take advantage of them. What we've done at the end of this slide is there is a resources link So we'll make sure that that's up for you guys to be able to kind of access, you know, the CIPD support, ACAS support, you know, the Menopause Workplace Pledge as well is really good for some starter tips for businesses, especially smaller businesses, of where to start. Christina?
Okay, so one of the key things, as I mentioned earlier, is you've got to communicate. You've got to communicate with, you know, with your staff. You've got to raise the awareness. You've got to break down the taboo, you know, around this subject. We've been fortunate to really run these, you know, sessions out and had a complete split, you know, in terms of gender balance within. And I would say that possibly 75% of the male participants just wanted to know what they could do to support. You know, they were really engaged and they really wanted to know, you know, what are the small areas. They were really looking into the details of things and how they could step up and support their colleagues within the workplace and have that level of understanding. But again, it all comes back to the policies and the processes that you have in place. That's where your key guidance is going to be. So if, you know, if we can ensure that these are rolled out, let's bring those policies to life. Are they reflective of what the, you know, the companies and the workforce requirements are at this moment in time? Are they legally compliant? When was the last time you guys checked them? You know, is it time now that we possibly do a review? You know, we can absolutely support you with that, but it's, you know, look at your policies and make sure that they are relevant. Make sure that they're relevant to the key topics and the key concerns that may be arising within your organisation at this moment in time. If something has come up, do you have something there, you know, do you have a policy there? Do you have a process there that can support it? You know, are your managers empowered enough to know how to deal with these matters? So it's just really about, again, communicating, having the relevant resources there that can support both the managers and the employee. You know, should whatever the matter be arise, and you can work through that. And again, show empathy. You know, if I think that's a huge thing that's come out of or that's came since the pandemic. You know, I think that everybody is more aware to show a wee bit more empathy within the workplace, you know, to have that higher level of understanding and understand that there may be something, you know, more, something else going on. It might not just be, you know, someone's not just having a bad day, you know, just show a wee bit more flexibility with your approach. All right. Okay, so as I say, as a manager, what you could do is be aware of your policies. You know, HR is very important that we step up and support managers with this too. We can't just hand it to them, you know, hand it to managers and expect them to work with it and, you know, bring it to life. Think about how that's rolling out within your organisation. Think about, are they being used? Think about, are they being linked together? You know, how are they working? How are the mechanics working through in the business at the moment? When was the last time that we rolled them out? When was the last time any training was done? How many new managers have come into the business that possibly don't even know where these policies live? You know, let's bring them to life. Talk to your team. Again, to me, it's all about communication and know your staff. Not, as Anna said, not one hat's going to fit all. So different folk for different strokes. You know, there's going to be approaches where we may feel that, oh, that's not going to work, but actually it does work for a certain individual. Okay, again, there's so many different things that this could, you know, reference within your organisation. Everybody has different things going on. So this could link into many of your policies, not just your menopause policy. But I think it's really imperative to make sure that that's up to date, you know, and you're doing something, you're being proactive with the policies and the resources that you have in place. I think it's important to not assume. Again, it's a very fine line, and some people may be quite open about, you know, their symptoms and how they're feeling, and, you know, just what you see is what you get. Some people are a wee bit more reserved and they don't want to discuss it because maybe they're really, you know, struggling with it. So don't assume, and certainly, unless you're a medical profession, don't offer medical advice. Okay, so know your limits. It's very important to know your limits in these cases. Again, as I previously mentioned, it is important as an individual that we understand what the process is. You know, we understand what our limitations are within our organisation, know what our managers' limitations are, and maybe look to bring a, you know, a recommendation forward if there's something in particular that you think that, you know, would suit you as, you know, and would support the business too. So you've got to ensure that you're engaging with the relevant people, and bringing any sort of concerns that you have forward, and looking for ways as well to support the solution, as well as, you know, gaining the additional support that you need. Diana? So be open and honest in the conversations with your line manager and with HR. For example, the flexible working option, if someone was offered flexible working, if you find that you just can't sleep at night, are you better working your hours, you know, through the night? If you're going to be up at that time and you've got a clearer head, is it possibly better for you to do your work then? Is there a way that we can flex your working hours, you know, while you're going through some of these more severe symptoms? Don't wait and suffer in silence. There's nothing worse in any subject than suffering in silence. So discuss with your medical profession, go to your GP, talk through options, you know, to support your health and well-being improvements. There's a huge effort being made at the moment to roll out new health and well-being strategies. Is there a health and well-being strategy group that you could possibly, you know, contribute and make some recommendations to that may support others that, you know, are possibly just at the beginning of their journey? Think of those around you as well. You know, what can we do? You may be just at the start. You may be in that age 40 to 44 bracket. Now, I know the ages aren't exclusive, but you may be in that kind of early perimenopause stage. And you may be looking to someone who's possibly went through the whole process to support. Maybe you could set up a peer group. You know, what did you do? And make recommendations. As I say, you know, on to the next point, join a support network. So that could be either within your organisation or out with your organisation, but just tap into those resources. So don't struggle, as I say, don't struggle on your own. I'm sure organisations would rather provide the support, and I'm sure that, as you know, as employers, you'd prefer for your employees to feel supported within the workplace, regardless of what the issue may be. Speak Talk Health if you have an internal lock health facility, if you have private medical insurance, you know, tap into your medical resources that are there, if you have them. And again, look at lifestyle changes that can help. You know, is there particular exercises that are beneficial? Is there a particular diet? You know, have a review yourself, because it's very much about helping yourself too, and the organisation will do their best to support as much as they can.
Excellent. Thanks, Christina. I think this was the resources page we were talking about. The Chamber has got these slides. So if, when watching this webinar, you would like to have access to the slides, I'm sure if you contact the Chamber, they'll be able to kind of send you this resources page. Just want to finish up by saying thank you very much for watching today. I hope you found it useful and informative. As I say, we at Burnett have obviously, we've done this internally. We are now helping a number of businesses in terms of providing this type of training and awareness training to managers, but also all staff across the businesses as well. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to contact us as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your time.